Revenge with Karen. The sound of a snapping finger is distinctive. It's a sharp, percussive demand that cuts through the hum of server fans and the murmur of six-figure deals being negotiated over lukewarm sparkling water. When it happens within 3 inches of your ear, it's not just a sound, it's a declaration of war. Hey, IT girl. Earth to IT girl. I didn't look up immediately. I was currently staring at a complex schematic for a Phase 3 fiber optic reroute that was supposed to ensure the 37th floor didn't melt down during the upcoming summer heatwave. My finger was tracing the line where the redundant cooling loop intersected with the primary server annex. It was a delicate ecosystem of power and glass, one that I had personally designed, negotiated, and leased to this firm 3 years ago. The fingers snapped again. Faster, like a metronome for an idiot. I know you can hear me, the voice drawled. It was Jared. Of course it was Jared. Jared was 26, wore a fleece vest that cost more than my first car, and had the job title of Director of Visionary Ops, which, as far as I could tell, meant his daddy was the vice president of the holding company. I finally turned my swivel chair. "Can I help you, Jared?" "The Wi-Fi," he said, gesturing wildly at the glass-walled conference room behind him, where 5 other guys in identical vests were staring at a frozen Zoom screen. "It's lagging. We're pitching the Series B guys in 3 minutes. Fix it." I took a slow breath. I am a 45-year-old woman in a tailored blazer. I do not wear a lanyard. I do not have a walkie-talkie clipped to my belt. I was sitting at the conference table because the light was better for reading blueprints, not because I was waiting for a help desk ticket. "I'm not IT, Jared," I said, my voice level. "I'm reviewing the infrastructure specs for the renewal. If you're having latency issues, you need to submit a ticket to the portal." Jared laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound. "Excuse me, I don't submit tickets. I tell people to do their jobs. You're sitting here with a laptop, aren't you? Fix the router, reboot the whatever. Just make the internet work." "I am busy," I said, turning back to the schematic. "And I don't have admin access to your local VLAN." That was the wrong thing to say, or perhaps the perfect thing. Jared slammed his hand down on the table, rattling my coffee cup. The entire open plan office went silent. The marketing team lowered their phones. The developers stopped typing. "You know what?" Jared shouted, his face flushing a blotchy red. "I am sick of the attitude from the support staff in this building. My father pays a fortune for this lease. I can't even get a stable connection. You're useless. You're actually useless." He pointed a finger at the door. "Get out. You're fired. I don't want to see you on this floor again. I'll have HR send your final check." "Go," I froze, not out of fear, but out of sheer scientific fascination. He was firing me. He actually thought he had the authority to fire me. Speaking of authority and making smart moves, if you're enjoying this disaster unfolding, me a favor and hit subscribe or drop a like. It helps the algorithm know you enjoy watching entitled executives implode. Thanks. I looked at him. I looked at the silent office watching us. I looked at the folder under my hand, the one containing the lease renewal addendum that was the only reason his Visionary Ops Center had power redundancy. "You're firing me?" I asked, just to have it on the record. "I'm firing you," Jared spat. "Get your shit and get out." Now, stood up. I didn't argue. I didn't explain that I wasn't an employee of Next Gen Synergies, but rather the independent infrastructure overseer for the entire Skyline Tower. I didn't mention that the IT girl he just screamed at held the master key to the building's neural network. I simply closed my laptop. I capped my pen. I picked up my leather folio, leaving the unsigned renewal contract sitting in the center of the mahogany table. "Understood," I said calmly. "Good luck with the Series B pitch, Jared." I walked to the elevator. I could feel 60 pairs of eyes on my back. I didn't rush. I pressed the button, waited for the chime, and stepped inside. As the doors closed, I saw Jared smugly high-fiving one of his vest buddies, thinking he had just asserted dominance. He hadn't asserted dominance. He had just severed the artery keeping his business alive. He just didn't know it yet. The elevator ride down to the lobby was smooth. Skyline Tower prides itself on its elevators. High-speed, whisper-quiet, serviced weekly. I know they're serviced weekly because I sign the vendor invoices. I stepped out into the lobby, the cool air conditioning hitting my face, and nodded to the security chief, grim-faced Larry, who was monitoring the camera bank. "Afternoon, Miss Tess," Larry grunted. "Everything good on 37? "Not anymore, Larry," I said, offering a tight smile. "Not anymore." 10 minutes later, exactly enough time for me to walk to the coffee shop across the street, order a double espresso, and sit by the window. The chaos started upstairs. I wasn't there to see it, but I didn't need to be. I knew the script. I had written the stage directions. Up on the 37th floor, Marcus, the building manager, walked out of the service elevator. Marcus is a good man. He's 60, wears suits that are slightly too large for him, sweats profusely when things go off script. He was carrying a notary stamp and a bottle of champagne. He was there to celebrate the signing of the 10-year lease extension, a deal I had spent 6 months negotiating with the VP, Jared's father. Marcus walked into the glass-walled conference room. He saw the folder I had left on the table. He saw Jared and his team, still high on adrenaline and low on situational awareness. "Afternoon, gentlemen," Marcus boomed, trying to be jovial. "Where is she? Where's Our Lady of the Hour? We've got ink to dry." Jared spun around, looking annoyed. "Who?" "Tess," Marcus said, looking around the room. "She said she was setting up in here. We need to finalize the infrastructure rider before 5 p.m. or the grandfather clause on your cooling unit expires." Jared scoffed, grabbing a Red Bull from the mini-fridge. "Oh, her? The brunette with the attitude? Yeah, I fired her." The room stopped. It wasn't a quiet stop. It was the kind of stop where the air gets sucked out of the room. The developers in the back row lowered their headphones. The HR director, a woman named Sarah who actually knew who I was but had been in the bathroom during the incident, walked in just in time to hear this. Her face went the color of bleached paper. Marcus blinked. He wiped sweat from his forehead. "I'm sorry, Jared. You did what?" "I fired her," Jared repeated, slower. He was talking to a child. "She was incompetent, couldn't fix the Wi-Fi, gave me lip, so I told her to pack up and get out. You're welcome, by the way, we need better vendors." Marcus stared at him. He stared at the empty chair where I had been sitting. He stared at the unsigned contract on the table. "Jared," Marcus said, his voice trembling slightly. "Tess isn't a vendor. She's not IT. Whatever, Tess is the landlord," Marcus whispered. "What? Technically, is the independent infrastructure overseer and leaseholder for the commercial zones," Marcus said, his volume rising as the panic set in. "She owns the rights to the fiber trunk you use. She owns the lease on the backup generators. She holds the master agreement for this entire floor. I just manage the janitors, Jared. She decides if this building has a pulse." Jared laughed nervously. "You're joking." "She was looking at a laptop. She was rewriting your lease." Marcus yelled. "Fired the person who was about to save you $2 million in retroactive utility fees." Jared's smile faltered. He looked at the folder on the table. He reached out and flipped it open. There, on the first page, in bold Arial font, Infrastructure Reliance Agreement, prepared by Tess R. Morrison, Managing Partner, Skyline Infrastructure Holdings. "Oh," Jared said, a small, weak sound. "She walked out?" Marcus asked, grabbing the table for support. "She say anything?" she said. "Understood," Jared mumbled. Marcus closed his eyes. "Oh God, she accepted the termination of the negotiation." "Jared, you didn't fire an employee. You just terminated your own service contract." Down on the street level, I watched my phone. A text came through from Marcus. "Please tell me he didn't." I took a sip of my espresso. I didn't reply. The door had closed. Now I was going to lock it. Office is not on the 37th floor. It is on the 4th floor, tucked behind the mechanical rooms and the freight elevator banks. It doesn't have a view of the city skyline. It has a view of the backup diesel generators and the massive cooling towers that hum with a low, thrumming vibration I find incredibly soothing. This is the brain of the building. The glass suites upstairs are just the decoration. I unlocked the heavy steel door and stepped inside. It was cool, quiet, smelled faintly of ozone and expensive paper. I sat down at my desk, a sprawling slab of oak covered in monitors, and woke up my workstation. I didn't feel angry. I really didn't. Anger is inefficient. Anger is messy. What I felt was a profound sense of obligation to the terms of the contract. Jared had been very clear. He didn't want me there. He didn't want my services. As a professional, I was bound to respect his wishes. I pulled the Next Gen Synergies binder from the shelf. It was 3 inches thick. I opened it to Section 14. B. Revocable privileges and shared utilities. Most tenants assume that when they rent a floor, they get everything. Water, power, internet, air. But Skyline Tower is an old building retrofitted for modern tech. The base lease covers 4 walls and a ceiling. Everything else, the high-speed fiber, the dedicated HVAC loop for the server room, biometric security access, those are add-on amenities provided by my company, essentially subleased to the building management to offer to tenants. Jared had just fired the provider of those amenities. I opened the building management software. My access level is root administrator. Step 1, the elevator priority protocol. Next-gen Synergies paid a premium for VIP lift access. It meant that when a keycard assigned to their floor swiped in the lobby, one of the 6 elevators would immediately prioritize their call. It shaved about 4 minutes off the morning commute. I found the clause. Contract status, negotiation terminated by tenant. I clicked the checkbox, revert to standard access. Now they were just like the call center on the 8th floor. They'd wait in line. Step 2, the freight elevator. They had a shipment of new servers arriving on Tuesday. I knew this because I had approved the dock schedule. However, access to the heavy-duty freight elevator requires a digital token issued by the infrastructure overseer. I revoked the token. When that truck arrived, they would have to carry those racks up the fire stairs. All 37 flights. Step 3, the climate control. This was the big one. The building's central AC keeps the offices at a comfortable 72 degrees. But a server room generates massive heat, needs a dedicated chilled water loop to keep the equipment from frying. That loop is my property. I pulled up the HVAC schematic. The flow to suite 3700 was currently set to high priority/subsidized. I typed in a new command, set to base building standard. The valve actuators on the roof would take about an hour to close. By tomorrow morning, their server room would be a sauna. I wasn't breaking the law. I wasn't sabotaging them. I was simply removing the services they had explicitly stated they no longer wanted from the IT girl. My phone rang. It was the landline. Only 3 people had this number: the building owner, the fire marshal, and the head of legal for the property management firm. It was the legal counsel, Brenda. Tess, Brenda's voice was tight. I just got a frantic call from Marcus. He says the VP's kid fired you. He did, I said, putting the call on speaker while I navigated to the security badge database. Publicly, with witnesses, he terminated our working relationship. Jesus, Brenda sighed. Okay, what are you doing? I'm adhering to the termination, I said. I'm rolling back the uncontracted amenities. I can't provide services without a signed liability waiver, Brenda. You know the insurance rules. If his servers melt and I don't have a contract, I get sued. I know, Brenda said. Not asking you to stop, I'm asking. How bad is it going to get? I looked at the monitor. I was hovering over the biometric bathroom locks tab. Well, I said, I hope they like using the public restrooms in the lobby. Understood, Brenda said. I'll draft the liability deflection. Have a good evening, Tess. You too, Brenda. I pressed execute. The beauty of infrastructure is its invisibility. When it works, you don't know it exists. You walk through a door, it opens. Breathe air, it's cool. You flush a toilet, it works. You assume these are natural laws of the universe, not services rendered by a contract. On the 37th floor, the laws of physics were changing. It started small. Around 3:30 p.m., the smart glass in the executive conference room, the stuff that frosts over for privacy at the touch of a button, stopped responding. It reverted to its default state, transparent. Jared was in the middle of a private yelling match with his logistics coordinator, and suddenly, the entire office could see him pacing and gesticulating like a mime in a glass box. I watched it on the security feed. It was like silent theater. Then came the biometric locks. The interior doors of their suite, separating the developer bullpen from the executive wing, were secured by fingerprint scanners. Those scanners routed through my local server. I disabled the account. The doors didn't lock permanently. That would be a fire hazard. Instead, they failed safe. They popped open and refused to latch. Suddenly, the exclusive executive wing was open to everyone. The junior interns wandered in, looking confused. The noise from the sales floor, the ringing phones, the chatter, flooded into Jared's sanctuary. But the real panic set in at 4:15 p.m. I have a dashboard that monitors tenant tickets. Usually, these go to the building management, but because the infrastructure is mine, I get a CC on anything tagged critical. Ticket #9942, server room temp alert. Current temp, 78 degrees F, rising. Ticket #9943, bathroom access denied. Exec washroom keycards not working. Ticket #9944, internet flickering. Packet loss 40%. Jared had called me IT. He didn't understand what IT actually ran on. The fiber trunk they used was a split line. Without my prioritization code, their massive data packets were now fighting for bandwidth with the dental call center on the 8th floor. The dentists were downloading massive X-ray files. Next Gen's video calls started looking like 8-bit Minecraft art. I sat in my office, sipping sparkling water, watching the temperature gauge for sweet 3700 climb. 79 degrees F, 80 degrees F. My email pinged. It was from Jared. Subject, glitch, body, hey. The AC is acting up and the doors are weird. Can you take a look? Need it fixed ASAP. No apology. No, I'm sorry I fired you. Just a demand. He still thought I was the help desk. He still thought he had the power. I didn't reply. I simply archived the email into a folder labeled Evidence of Unauthorized Service Requests. 5 minutes later, phone rang. It was Marcus again. Tess, he's screaming in the lobby, Marcus whispered. He says the building is attacking him. He's trying to get the maintenance guy, old Bill, to hack the thermostat. Bill can't hack the thermostat, I said calmly. It's encrypted with a 256-bit key. It's hardwired into the lease logic controller. I know that, Marcus said, but Jared doesn't. He's threatening to sue the building for breach of habitable workspace. Let him, I said. Lease guarantees a temperature of 74 degrees for standard office space. It does not guarantee cooling for a high-density server farm. That was an addendum. The one he didn't sign. He's asking for you, Marcus said. He's asking where the hell the IT girl went. Tell him I've been terminated, I said. And tell him that as a non-employee, I am not authorized to enter the premises. He's going to call his dad, Marcus warned. I'm counting on it, I said. 82 degrees F in the server room. The automated safety protocols kicked in. The servers began to throttle their CPU speed to prevent overheating. The Series B pitch deck they were trying to upload, it was now moving at the speed of a 1998 dial-up connection. I checked the freight elevator camera. A delivery guy was standing there with 10 boxes of pizza for the team working late. He swiped his card. Red light. He swiped again. Red light. He shrugged, turned around, and left the pizzas with the front desk security. Jared's team was going to be hungry, hot, and stuck in a room with open doors and slow internet. The chain reaction had begun. While Jared was sweating through his fleece vest upstairs, I was straightening my blazer. I had a lunch meeting scheduled for the next day, but I decided to move it up to dinner. I walked across the street to the Capitol Grill. It's the kind of place where the steak is aged for dry weeks and the waiters know your name. I was meeting Robert Vance, the CEO of Omnitech. Omnitech was Next Gen's direct competitor. They were a solid, unpretentious company that had been trying to get a foothold in Skyline Tower for 2 years. They were currently crammed into a sublet on the 12th floor, desperate for more bandwidth and better cooling for their own expansion. Jared's father had outbid them for the 37th floor 3 years ago. Robert stood up when I arrived. He was a man in his 50s, silver hair, impeccably polite. Tess, he said, shaking my hand. I didn't expect to hear from you so soon. Is everything all right with the infrastructure renewals? Everything is changing, Robert, I said, sliding into the booth. I placed a thin folder on the table. I ordered a Pinot Noir. Robert waited, his eyes on the folder. Have a unique situation, I began. A block of high-priority infrastructure capacity has just become available. Immediate availability. Redundant fiber loop, dedicated chilled water cooling, and VIP elevator priority. Robert raised an eyebrow. I thought Next Gen had that locked down for another 5 years. The renewal was a formality, wasn't it? The renewal was rejected, I said, choosing my words carefully. Tenant representative terminated the negotiation and the service provider. Effectively, immediately. Robert stared at me. He was a smart man. He didn't ask for the gossip. He looked at the opportunity. How much capacity? Enough to run your new AI division, I said. And since the physical infrastructure is already routed to the riser, I can divert the bandwidth to your floor in, about 10 minutes. And the cost? Standard market rate, I said, plus a signing bonus for the expedited service, and a 5-year commitment. Robert smiled. It was the smile of a predator who just found a wounded gazelle. Tess, if you can get me that bandwidth by tomorrow morning, I'll sign the 5-year deal tonight. My CTO has been screaming for more fiber. I have the contract right here, I said, tapping the folder. And I can have the bandwidth rerouted by the time we finish our steaks. We spent the next hour reviewing the clauses. Robert didn't snap his fingers. He didn't call me IT girl. He asked intelligent questions about latency guarantees and power load balancing. He treated me like what I was, the landlord of the invisible world. As I signed the countersignature, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from the building system. Alert, Tenant 3700 Next Gen, attempting unauthorized access to breaker panel 4. Jared was getting desperate, was trying to physically reset the breakers, thinking it was a fuse issue. Is everything okay? Robert asked, seeing me check my phone. Just a minor glitch in the old system, I said, putting the phone away. So, Robert, about the freight elevator. I have a slot opening up on Tuesday morning. Do you have any equipment you need to move in? Actually, Robert said, we have a new server rack sitting in a warehouse in Jersey. We've been waiting for a slot. Bring it in, I said. Clear the path. I walked out of the restaurant with a signed contract worth $1.2 million over 5 years. I had just sold Jared's bandwidth to his biggest rival. And the best part, the fiber cables ran physically through the ceiling of the 37th floor to reach the 12th. Jared would be literally sitting under the internet speed he used to have, listening to it hum as it worked for someone else. The next morning, Friday, legal machinery finally ground into gear. I was in my office at 8 a.m. I like the mornings. The building is waking up, the systems are ramping up. I watched the graphs on my monitors. Tenant 1200 Omnitech, bandwidth usage spiking. Efficiency 98%. Tenant 3700 Next Gen, bandwidth usage critical. Packet loss 65%. Temp 84 degrees F. At 8:15 a.m., the phone rang. Wasn't the internal line. It was an outside number. Area code 212, New York, corporate legal. This is Tess, I answered. Miss Morrison, this is Alan Sterling, General Counsel for Next Gen Synergy's parent corp. His voice was smooth, expensive, and currently strained. I'm looking at a very disturbing report from our satellite office in Texas. They claim the building is experiencing a catastrophic failure of services. Mr. Sterling, I said pleasantly, I'm familiar with the situation. However, I would correct your terminology. The building is functioning perfectly. The services to Suite 3700 have simply been aligned with their current contractual status. Contractual status? Sterling paused. I could hear him shuffling papers. I have a lease agreement here that runs through 2028. You have a base lease for the square footage, I corrected. Please refer to Addendum C, subsection 4, guarding technological amenities. It states clearly that high-speed fiber, enhanced cooling, and security integration are month-to-month services provided by the infrastructure overseer, subject to annual renewal. And the on-site representative, Mr. Jared Vance, terminated the provider of those services yesterday, verbally and publicly. He dismissed the renewal negotiation. Silence. Long, heavy silence. He fired you? Sterling asked. Smooth veneer was cracking. He did. He mistook me for technician, insulted my competence, and ordered me off the premises. As per the harassment clause in my vendor agreement, I complied immediately. Miss Morrison, Sterling's voice dropped an octave. You and I both know Jared is excitable. He's the VP's son. But we cannot have these systems offline. We are bleeding data. We are missing deadlines. What do we need to do to fix this? Well, I said, leaning back in my chair. Usually, I would simply reopen the negotiation. But unfortunately, the capacity that Next Gen released has already been acquired. Acquired? By whom? I can't disclose other client details, but the bandwidth has been reallocated. The cooling load has been shifted. You sold our internet. Sterling sounded like he was choking. I sold the available internet, I said. I can't sit on inventory, Alan. You know business. Okay, Sterling said. Okay, look, I'm going to call the VP. I'm going to call Jared. We need a meeting today. Name your time. I'm fully booked today, I lied. I was planning to reorganize my filing cabinet. I can squeeze you in on Monday morning. 9 a.m. Monday, that's 3 days. The servers will melt by Monday. I suggest you tell them to power down non-essential systems, I said. Maybe turn off the lights. Open a window. Oh wait, the windows don't open. Pity. Tess. Ease Monday, Alan, and tell Jared to bring a pen. A working one. I hung up. Monday was going to be interesting. But first, they had to survive the weekend. A skyscraper is a living organism. If you stop feeding it, it starts to die. By Friday afternoon, the 37th floor was unlivable. The temperature had stabilized at a sweltering 86 degrees. The air was stale because the circulation fans, which relied on the same control logic as the cooling, defaulted to minimum turnover to save energy. It smelled of body odor, warm plastic, and desperation. Most of the staff had gone home. They claimed remote work, but without the VPN functioning, hosted on the overheated servers, they were effectively on paid vacation. Only Jared and a skeleton crew remained, trying to salvage the servers. They had brought in portable fans from Walmart. It was pathetic. Little white plastic fans buzzing against a wall of industrial heat. I went home for the weekend. I gardened. I read a book. I slept soundly. Monday morning, 9:01 a.m. The system goes dark phase wasn't something I triggered manually. It was an automated expiration. You see, the electronic keycards used by the staff had a rolling encryption code that updated every 72 hours via the network. If the network didn't update the keys stopped working. It was a security feature I had installed to prevent former employees from accessing the building. The update was scheduled for Sunday midnight. The network was down. The update failed. I arrived at the lobby at 8:45 a.m. It was a scene of beautiful chaos. 30 employees from NextGen were standing at the turnstiles. They were swiping their badges. Beep, beep. Red light. Beep, beep. Red light. What is going on? One of the developers yelled at Larry, the security guard. My badge isn't working. System says expired, Larry grunted, tapping his screen. Can't let you up without a valid badge. Jared was there. He looked terrible. He was wearing the same clothes as Friday. He hadn't shaved. He saw me walk in. I was wearing a cream-colored suit. I was holding a latte. I breezed past the turnstiles, tapped my MasterCard beep, green light, and walked through. You, Jared shouted, lunging over the velvet rope. Larry stepped in front of him, massive arms crossed. Back up, sir, Larry warned. She's doing this. Jared screamed, pointing a trembling finger at me. She locked us out. I stopped and turned. The lobby was crowded. People from other companies were watching. I didn't lock you out, Jared, I said, my voice carrying clearly. Your security protocol requires a network handshake to validate credentials. You don't have a network. Therefore, don't have credentials. Fix it, he screamed. Just fix it. I have a meeting at 9:00 a.m., I said, checking my watch. With the tenant representatives. Are you the representative? Because from where I'm standing, you look like a trespasser. I turned to the elevator. 4th floor, I said to the voice command. The doors slid shut, cutting off the sight of Jared trying to explain to his own employees why they couldn't go to work. Upstairs, the 37th floor was dark, hot, and silent. The servers had finally engaged their thermal shutdown. The lights were off because the motion sensors hadn't received a keep alive ping. It was a ghost town, and I was the one holding the exorcism manual. The conference room on the 4th floor is nothing like the glass box upstairs. It's windowless, soundproofed, and lit by harsh fluorescent strips. It's an interrogation room disguised as a meeting space. At 9:00 a.m. sharp, the door opened. Marcus walked in first, looking relieved that I was taking the lead. Then came Alan Sterling, the lawyer, looking exhausted. Then came the VP, Thomas Vance, Jared's father. He was a short man, bald, with eyes like flint. He wore a suit that cost more than my annual salary. Finally, Jared trailed in. He looked like a beaten dog, but a dog that would still bite if you turned your back. They sat down on one side of the table. I sat on the other. Alone. Miss Morrison. Thomas Vance started. His voice was gravel. Let's cut the crap. We are losing $50,000 an hour. My son made a mistake. He thought you were support staff. He was stressed. We apologize. He nudged Jared. Jared looked at the table. I'm sorry, he mumbled. I shouldn't have fired you. Can we just turn the internet back on now? I looked at Jared. Then I looked at Thomas. Mr. Vance, I said, your son didn't just mistake me. Publicly humiliated the person responsible for the structural integrity of your business. But that's personal. I can get over personal. The problem is strictly professional. I opened my folder. I pulled out a single sheet of paper. This is the renewal contract for the infrastructure, I said. Thomas reached for it. Fine, we'll sign it. Same terms? No, I said, pulling the paper back slightly. This is the voided contract. Excuse me? Alan Sterling asked. It's a Friday evening. The bandwidth allocation previously reserved for NextGen Synergies was released to the open market, I said. It has been purchased. Purchased? Thomas's eyes widened. By whom? Omnitech, I said. Thomas slammed his hand on the table. Omnitech, the guys across the street. You sold our fiber to our competitors. I sold my fiber, I corrected. To a paying client with a signed contract. You didn't have a contract, Thomas. Had a handshake and a renewal that your representative threw in my face. Undo it, Thomas commanded. Cancel their deal. Give it back to us. We'll pay double. I can't, I said. It's a 5-year binding agreement. Penalties for breach are astronomical. Besides, they're already using it. Their traffic is live. So what are you saying? Jared piped up, his voice cracking. We just don't have internet. You have the base building internet, I said. DSL speeds. Good for email, bad for whatever it is you do. Visionary ops, I believe. We can't run the platform on DSL, Jared shouted. Then I suggest you relocate, I said coldly, because this building can no longer support your needs. Thomas Vance stared at me. He looked at his son. He looked at the lawyer. He realized, finally, the magnitude of the screw-up. You're evicting us, Thomas whispered, without serving an eviction notice. You're starving us out. I'm just the landlord, Thomas, I said, standing up. I just provide the walls. What you do inside them is up to you. But if you want cooling, power, and data, you need a friend in infrastructure, and you don't have one anymore. I walked to the door. Oh, and Jared, I paused. The freight elevator is booked tomorrow. Omnitech is moving in their new server racks. You'll have to wait until Wednesday to move your things out. I'd suggest using the stairs. The move out was painful to watch, which is why I watched every second of it on the security monitors. On Wednesday, the next-gen team began the strategic relocation. That's corporate speak for running away in shame, because I had blocked the freight elevator for emergency maintenance. A loose bolt I found, very dangerous. They had to use the service elevator. It was small. They had to dismantle their server racks piece by piece. Jared wasn't there. I heard through the grapevine. Eating Marcus told me over beers that Thomas Vance had reassigned his son. Jared was now the director of special projects at a satellite office in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I checked the specs for that office. It's a warehouse district. The internet there is copper wire. Good luck, Jared. Omnitech moved into the 37th floor 2 months later. Next Gen broke their lease, paying a massive penalty that went straight into the building owners' pockets. Owners gave me a nice bonus for aggressive yield management. Omnitech is a great tenant. They submit tickets properly. They say please and thank you. They bring donuts to the security guards. I was sitting in the 37th floor conference room again, 6 months later. Robert, the Omnitech CEO, was signing off on a request for additional power. You know, Robert said, looking out at the skyline, I still can't believe they just left. Why would anyone walk away from a setup like this? I took a sip of my coffee. Poor management, I said. They didn't understand the foundation. Well, Robert smiled. We're happy to be here. By the way, my nephew is starting an internship next week. He's a bit of a hotshot. Thinks he knows everything about computers. I froze for a second. I told him, Robert continued, that the first person he introduces himself to is Tess. I told him that if he ever snaps his fingers at you, I'll throw him off the roof myself. I smiled, a real smile this time. He'll be fine, Robert, as long as he knows where the power comes from. I walked back to my office, the bunker behind the elevators. I sat down, checked the monitors. Temp, 72 degrees F. Stable. Bandwidth, optimal. Tenant satisfaction, 100%. I opened my drawer and pulled out a fresh file folder. I printed a label. Omnitech Infrastructure Agreement. I filed it away. The building hummed around me. It was breathing. It was alive. And everything was exactly where it was supposed to be. My dignity was intact. My bonus was cleared. And somewhere in Tulsa, Jared was probably waiting for a PDF to load. We're all healed.
Places don't hand out justice memos, but somehow it always finds the right inbox. This story was proof that quiet moves beat loud egos every time. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time.